Go ahead and begin.
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Tony Brandt, and I am a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner, and I have been practicing for 10 years. I've been a nurse for over 30, a registered nurse for over 30 years, and worked in mental health. I am the co-chair of the Mental Health Equity Subcommittee for NCNW. Welcome to the National Council of Negro Women and Alzheimer's Association webinar, The 10 Warning Signs of Alzheimer's. We're so glad that you have joined us today to learn more about Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. This program is designed for those who want to learn more about the warning signs of Alzheimer's and other dementias, as well as those who have noticed memory or thinking changes in themselves or others. Before we dive into today's session, I would like to turn it over to Beverly Berry, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Engagement at the Alzheimer's Association Home Office, to share more about our partnership and the importance of the information that will be shared. Please welcome Beverly Berry.
Thank you, Dr. Brandt. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's. The Alzheimer's Association is pleased and excited to partner with the National Council of Negro Women. Our goals for our 3-year partnership includes providing education about brain health, cognitive aging, and the importance of an early diagnosis. Through NCNW sections and our local association chapters, we will incorporate grassroots community engagement to ensure that all communities have access to our resources, services, and programs. This is extremely important as women and African Americans are disproportionately affected by this devastating disease. Yet they're least likely to have access to care and support services, least likely to be recruited to participate in research or clinical trials, and less likely to have access to our resources and services. This is unacceptable and it must change. And through strategic partnerships with trusted national and local organizations such as NCNW, we can create a pathway to greater health equity, mission engagement, and inclusion within this movement. The association is committed to providing all communities with resources and education until we reach our vision of a world without Alzheimer's and all other dementias. Stay tuned. There'll be more details announced on how your local NCNW sections can partner with local association chapters. And at this time, I want to send a special thank you to NCNW members and leadership that has made this partnership possible. I'd like to start with thanking the National Chair, Dr. Janetta Cole, Executive Director, Mrs. Janice Mathis, Health Equity Committee Co-Chair, Shara Denton, NCNW Health Equity Co-Chair, Dr. Tony Brandt, Kimberly Johnson, and I would also like to thank my amazing colleagues, Mia Chester and Camilla White, for laying a foundation for this important work to be implemented at the Georgia level, at the Georgia NCNW section and with the local Alzheimer's Association chapter. They were truly instrumental in helping to elevate this partnership to a national level. So thank you all so much. And we look forward to the amazing work that we're going to do together. And at this time, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Brandt to introduce our presenters for today.
Thank you, Beverly, for that awesome welcome. Thank you for setting the stage for today's webinar. We are excited to partner with the Alzheimer's Association to provide this very timely and important information to our NCNW members and communities across the country. At this time, I would like to introduce our facilitators for today's session. We are joined by Mia Chester. Mia serves as program manager for the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. Mia has been in the aging field since 2005 and has served in management as well as program and service coordination positions for older adult populations throughout her career. She's dedicated the past 14 years in service to the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter. Her role as program manager allows her to lead local initiatives for the Alzheimer's Association, community-based education programs, support groups, and community services. She holds a master's degree in health studies from the University of Alabama. We are also joined by Camilla White, Colonel Sister retired. Camilla received a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration from Strayer University in 1994. She also received a Master of Science degree in Managerial Leadership from National Louis University in 1998 and a Master's of Strategic Studies from the U.S. Army War College in 2001. Colonel White retired from the military in September 2005. However, she continued to work as a contractor, as a program manager, and later resumed her career as Department of Defense employee and held many positions ranging from logistics management officer to chief concept development. As a retiree, she is passionate about improving the lifestyle of older adults and those affected by Alzheimer's disease. Currently, she is an advocate for the Alzheimer's Association Georgia chapter, where she advocates for different policies, funding, and legislation with Congress, and serves as community educator. Colonel Sister Camilla is currently an educator with the Douglas County School System in the Special Education Department and a member of the Northwest Georgia section of NCNW. Please welcoming our facilitators as they present the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's and dementia, Mia and
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Brent. And today we will kind of review a couple of things, but the most important things on our agenda would be to talk about the 10 warning signs and describe typical age-related changes, such as memory, thinking, and behavior. We'll also talk about how you approach someone that you might be concerned about and how you address a conversation with them. Finally, we'll close out with resources for support so that you all know how the Alzheimer's Association is available to help you. So it's important for us to kind of define what is dementia so that we are all clear. And oftentimes you hear the word dementia and Alzheimer's disease used interchangeably, but we want to make sure that everyone with us today has a clear understanding of the difference. Dementia is known as a general term or an umbrella term to describe problems in thinking or problems with thought, mood, behavior, language, and judgment. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia. There are many different types of dementia. However, a person can also have mixed dementia. So that would be a person having maybe Alzheimer's disease and another form of dementia at the same time. As you'll see on the screen, we have a couple of the most common ones listed, such as frontotemporal dementia, which is a form of dementia that affects our frontal lobes of our brain. And we store our executive function as well as our filter. So a person may lose their social graces and they may struggle with in their inhibition. So they may completely lose their inhibitions with this form of dementia. Another form that we'll quickly point out would be vascular dementia. So vascular dementia is related to a reduction in oxygen and blood flow to the brain. So for anyone that has had a history of stroke or are concerned about strokes, this would be a concern as well, going on to develop vascular dementia. So again, there are many different types. These are some of the most common forms. And on our website, alz.org, you can find more descriptions as well as more of the characteristics of the different types of dementia. So next slide. So it's important that we talk about and address the disparities in Alzheimer's disease. What we know is that more than 5 million Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's disease. And by 2050, this number is expected to grow to almost 14 million. We also know that every 65 seconds, someone in the United States develops Alzheimer's disease. And currently, Alzheimer's is known as the 6th leading cause of death. One thing to point out here is that Alzheimer's is the only disease in the top 10 causes of death that cannot be prevented, cured, or slowed. Next slide. So because we are talking to NCNW today, it's important that we address some of the statistics surrounding women of color as well as caregiving. So I wanted to share with you some statistics that women are disproportionately affected by Alzheimer's disease, and it can have a devastating impact, and it places an unbalanced burden on women at home and at work, forcing them to make difficult decisions about their careers or their relationships as well as their future. A woman's estimated lifetime risk of developing Alzheimer's at age 65 is 1 in 6, and as real as concern as breast cancer to women's health. And women in their 60s are about is twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease during the rest of their lives as they are to develop breast cancer. Older Black and Hispanic Americans are also more likely than older whites to have Alzheimer's and dementias, and we estimate that it's 2 times as likely for our community to develop Alzheimer's disease. So another statistic to keep in mind is that more than 60% of Alzheimer's and dementia caregivers are women, and more than 3 in 5 unpaid Alzheimer's caregivers are serving in those roles and balancing those difficult tasks of home and family. There are 2.5 women, 2.5 more women than men that provide 24-hour care for someone with Alzheimer's disease. And lastly, nearly 19% of women serving as an Alzheimer's caregiver had to quit their work to either become a caregiver because it became too burdensome. So as you can see, women are at the epicenter of this disease, and we want to bring light to that. So during the next part of our program, I'll turn it over to Camilla to talk about some of the signs and symptoms.
Well, thank you very much, Mia. As we talk about the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, some of the examples that I provide to you are real-world examples because I am a caregiver of my mom since 2014. My dad was diagnosed with Alzheimer's as well. May he rest in peace. However, he didn't pass away from Alzheimer's. He passed away from heart failure. It's important to know what the warning signs are and to be on the lookout for these marked changes. The Alzheimer's Association, as a leader in this area, developed a list of 10 warning signs to help people understand the difference between normal aging and common signs of possible dementia. This list is intended to be a tool to help identify unusual changes in a person's memory, thinking, and behavior. It's important to note that this list does not constitute a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. I repeat, this list does not constitute a diagnosis of Alzheimer's or dementia. These are simply the most common examples of changes experienced. Individuals may experience one or more of these signs in different degrees. Let's explore each sign and what some typical age-related changes may be. One of the most common signs of Alzheimer's, especially early on, is forgetting recently learned information. Others include forgetting important dates or events, repeatedly asking the same questions, and increasingly relying on memory aids or leaning on others for things or tasks once handled on their own. Good example is my dad used to forget to pay the mortgage. There was always a telephone call coming in that his mortgage was late. And that was one of the biggest signs that we were able to acknowledge was that he wasn't paying the mortgage on time, which is something he always was able to do. A typical age-related change is sometimes forgetting information but remembering later. Some people may experience new difficulties in executive functioning, including developing or following a plan or difficulty concentrating. Conversely, a more typical age-related change is making occasional errors when managing bills or household finances. People living with dementia often find it hard to complete daily tasks that used to be managed with ease. such as driving to a familiar place, writing a grocery list, or remembering how to play a favorite game. Dad used to get lost in going to the grocery store and coming back home, which was about 2 blocks from the house, but it would take him an hour because he forgot his way home. Conversely, a typical age-related change would be occasionally needing help to use a microwave or remote. This could also include having trouble with new technology that the person hasn't had the opportunity to engage with as frequently. An individual living with Alzheimer's or another dementia may lose track of dates, seasons, or passage of time. They may have trouble understanding something if it's not currently happening, or become confused about where they are or how they got there. This can become more dramatic or profound in the middle and late stages. A more typical age-related change could be getting confused about what day it is or when a scheduled appointment is, but figuring it out later. Some individuals with Alzheimer's or another dementia may experience vision problems, which can lead to difficulty with balance, trouble reading, and problems judging distance and determining color and contrast, which can all impact driving or navigating the environment around them. Vision changes such as cataracts are a more typical age-related change. This sign shows that these changes are not just about memory. It's important to think about all of the other ways that someone's daily life may be impacted by any of these changes. Individuals may have trouble following or joining a conversation. They'll stop in the middle of a conversation and forget what they were talking about and continuously repeat themselves. They may also struggle with finding the right word or calling things by the wrong name. They may start using more descriptive terms to talk about something rather than the name of the actual item. And as I have conversations with my mom, even as of today's date, we can be talking about something and she'll just get in the middle of the conversation and stop. She'll stop because she can't find the words to put into that conversation. She can't find the words to make it so descriptive that I can understand. So she just stopped and she won't have anything else to say. A normal age-related change, however, would be occasionally having trouble finding the right words. Misplacing things and losing ability to retrace steps. How many of you on webinar land actually do that right today? You put something down and you go back to find it and you're like, oh my goodness, where did I put that at? I can't find it. But maybe an hour later or that afternoon, you'll be able to regroup your thoughts and find it. But what if it takes you 2 or 3 days, maybe a week or a month, or you really just don't know where you put it? Then all of a sudden you look in the refrigerator and guess what's in the refrigerator? Those keys. But there's a difference in between those two I just talked about. This sign often causes concern in people. I want to clarify that this is not about just losing your keys on occasion, misplacing things from time to time, but retracing steps to find them is a normal age-related change. A person with Alzheimer's disease may lose things and not be able to recall when it was last seen, or identify the location where it was placed. Or he or she may put things in an unusual place, such as putting shoes in the refrigerator. Because of the lack of executive function and awareness, the person may grow increasingly suspicious of others and start accusing others of stealing and do so more frequently over time. Dad used to accuse us of always, and I mean always, moving his things, taking his things. And he had everything situated at the dining room table where he used to eat and pay his bills. It was from left to right, fork, spoon, plate, his cup. His checkbook was at the top. And if anything was ever out of place, we were the culprits. Decreased or poor judgment. Individuals may experience changes in judgment or decision making. such as using poor judgment when dealing with money or paying less attention to hygiene and grooming. This can be especially common in individuals who live alone. Making a bad decision once in a while, such as forgetting to get your oil change, is a more typical age-related change. Withdrawal from work or social activities. How many of you out there in webinar land, even right today, say, oh my goodness, here we come up with the holidays. Oh my gosh, I really don't feel like being bothered. I don't want to go to that social event. I just rather take my book, crawl up in a corner and read for a little bit and just become a hermit for a minute or two. But as we age, it's normal to feel uninterested by family or social engagements at times. However, someone who is experiencing dementia-related changes may start to lose the ability to hold or follow a conversation, and as a result, begin withdrawing from social encounters or hobbies. They may lose the confidence to engage in that way. Changes in mood and personality. Individuals with Alzheimer's or another dementia may become confused, suspicious, depressed, fearful, or anxious. They might get easily upset either at home or when out of their comfort zone. As we age, however, it's normal to develop very specific ways of doing things and becoming upset or irritable when our routine is disrupted. They have to stay within that routine because their mind doesn't adjust to going to the store every day and all of a sudden I'm taking you to the mall. So you have to prepare and prep them for that change. Someone with Alzheimer's or dementia may become fearful, angry, or easily frustrated, which is something that should be addressed. I will now turn it over to Mia Chester.
Well, it's important to remember that a person might have one, some, or they can even have all of the symptoms, but we want you to take it seriously and make sure that you're acting and talking to your healthcare provider about those symptoms. So the next portion of the program is going to give you tips on interpreting those different signs that Camilla mentioned, as well as deciding on what would be your next steps. So oftentimes family and friends are the first to notice changes, but it can create for a challenging situation because we don't want to accuse our loved ones or friends of having dementia, but it's important for us to have what I like to consider courageous conversations around Alzheimer's disease and dementia. So sometimes the person exhibiting the symptom isn't even aware that they're doing it, or they may not have the insight to know that these changes are problematic. So it's critical for someone else to be able to recognize these signs, as well as to be able to support their loved ones as they go through this process. So the next slide, we'll talk about how you actually address or assess the situation. So it's important to be able to identify what the actual changes are. Is that person experiencing short-term memory loss? Are they getting lost while driving? What is the actual behavior that you're seeing? And one good rule of thumb is to always maybe jot it down or write it down, because there are times where you may even forget that they did something. And oftentimes we tell families it's a good tool to take to the healthcare provider to really describe what those symptoms are. So again, the first step is really knowing what that sign is and how it might be different from that person's typical behavior. The next thing you want to consider is what else might be going on. So one of the things that I didn't mention earlier is that a person may have some conditions that mimic or cause memory loss, but can be treated. These are things like urinary tract infections, B12 deficiency, dehydration, among others. But once these are treated, that memory loss may go away, and that person comes back to you. So the thought is finding out what else might be going on, because those conditions may be treated and that person no longer has an issue. However, if it is a situation where, none of those other conditions are present, it is important to kind of continue in the process to figure out what is going on and what the next steps would be. We also encourage people to learn about the signs and benefits of early detection and some of the benefits, because we often hear people say, well, I don't want to know. And we kind of discourage that behavior because early detection is key. Medications are more effective earlier on, and that person gets to become more proactive in their care planning, and they get to tell their family members how they like things. So I always say that they get to have a voice, and that's really important as a person progresses during the disease. And then finally, in the assessing the situation, we talk about has anyone else noticed the changes? So it's important to talk to other family members, especially if it's a loved one, to see if they might have noticed changes and what were those changes that they noted, and have some time to really compare and talk through those situations, and talk about, what might have happened, what was the environment like for that person, because it could be a situation where you can pinpoint how often those changes are happening and when or why those changes might be happening. Next slide. So the next important thing is to actually start our conversation. And again, this can be very scary, and sometimes we don't really know how to approach a person when we are concerned. So the first thing that we say is, if you are concerned about yourself having some of the signs and symptoms, it's important to confide in someone that you trust, and in someone that will support you throughout this journey. So anyone is capable of having that conversation, but it is important to have the right people in your corner as you go through a diagnostic process so that they can support you. Again, it could be a trusted friend, a church member, a fellow sister in NCNW. The important thing is to step up and have those conversations. So the next thing is, when is the best time to do that? And we say as soon as possible. Again, medications are effective earlier on. So we want to make sure that we are having these conversations as early as possible to seek medical advice early, so that if it is dementia or Alzheimer's disease, we can start some medications early to be more effective. The next thing to consider is, what will you or the person having the conversation say? And I think it's important to be honest with that person, but it is also important to be kind and gentle, because it can be frustrating to know that if you are experiencing symptoms, that someone else has noticed things that you haven't. So we always say, be gentle, be patient, and really take your time to listen to that person's concerns, because chances are they've noticed some changes within themselves, but they have not had the courage to talk about them. So patience is a really big factor in having that conversation. We also say, offer to be a support system to them and go to the doctor with them. So if they come to a point where they're trying to explain what might be going on, they'll have you in their corner to help them out, should they become fearful or anxious at any time when talking to the doctor. And I always say this is a good time too to consider what a care partnership might look like, because it might be that a person starts to look at who might be in their circle that they can count on as they go through this journey of finding out what might be causing that memory loss. It's important to have supportive people in your corner. And finally, if needed, you might have to have multiple conversations. So again, this is where patience comes in. It may not sit well the first, second, or third time, but it's important for you all to have the stamina to say, I know something's wrong, or I know something's going on, and be able to support that person no matter how they respond. So just know that one conversation might not solve all the problems, that you may need to revisit that conversation. Next slide. So finally, we say, please reach out for help. The Alzheimer's Association is here to support you, and we can give you really detailed steps on having that conversation and what provide you with things that you need to know if you're concerned and questions to ask doctors. So that next step is to see a doctor. We don't want anyone to wait on that. We think that is very important and urgent. So after you've had this courageous conversation with your friend or loved one, it is important to schedule a doctor's appointment. So next slide, please. We always say it's important to start with your primary care provider just so that they are aware of your medical history and they can provide details should you want to see a specialist. But your primary care physician is kind of that first line of defense. If they are not available to make an evaluation, we have a listing on the screen of some of the specialists that we would recommend that might be instrumental in making a diagnosis. So you'll see here, geriatricians often have additional training in medical care for diseases and conditions among older adults, specifically over 65. There are neurologists who specialize in diseases of the brain and the nervous systems. And then there's also neuropsychologists who can assess, diagnose, and treat psychological disorders that might be associated with brain-based conditions. You also have the option to see psychiatrists. They specialize in disorders that affect the mood or the way the mind might works, as well as psychologists. So keep in mind, there are a lot of different specialists that you might be referred to in this process. And, a neurologist is always a great start in that specialty field. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about what might happen in the diagnostic process. So keep in mind that what you're seeing on the screen, not everyone will be asked to undergo these different steps. But some of the key steps in an assessment includes medical history, so working with the primary care provider to determine what other medical conditions might be a cause of the memory loss or contributing factors. Also, a physical exam. They might screen for depression, and they might interview family members to kind of determine what are the changes that they are noticing as well. Some of the tests may include laboratory tests, mental cognitive status tests, as well as brain imaging. So one thing to remember here is that it is not likely to walk into an office, a doctor's office today and get a thorough diagnosis. It may take time to get to that diagnosis. And we say just be patient because you want to make sure what that is an accurate diagnosis, and keep in mind that it may not be Alzheimer's disease. It may be something else. So patience again is key here. Next slide. All right, so we want to share with you some tips on having the conversation with your friends, family, and people within your community. So it can be difficult to know what to do if you've noticed the changes or how to approach that conversation. But it's natural to feel uncertain about voicing your worries because you don't want to make a person, feel bad, and it becomes more real to them. So how you approach the conversation is really, really important. So we're going to give you some tips on how to do that. So let's think about approaching the conversation with a close family member and how you might go about that in the right way. So it's natural to kind of have some reservations about how to approach them because this is a sensitive topic. So know that you're not alone in that matter. And one of the things you want to remember is that you are coming to them after you've observed the situation. So we don't want to prematurely have conversations when we really don't kind of know the background. So we would say observe the situation to see what other factors might play a role in the memory loss the person might be experiencing. Are they dealing with recent stress? Do they have other medical conditions that are going on? Because you want to be able to talk through those things as well. And then we say, start the conversation by asking if they've noticed any changes. So we never want to be accusatory. We always want to open that conversation up with, have you been recently concerned? Are there some things that you were doing that you thought, is this typical age-related changes, or is this something else? So allow them to participate in the conversation, and allow them to share their concerns, because you might be surprised. They may be vocal and say, I've noticed things, but I haven't known like what to do for them. So keep that in mind, to allow them to share their thoughts. Next slide. So when we start talking to maybe an NCNW member or a colleague, we always say, consider talking to others who are close to this person to validate your concerns. Now, we want to be careful about, going behind someone's back or gossiping about it. But what we mean here is to talk to someone that is close to that person, close to the person you're concerned about, because if you've noticed changes, it may be that they've noticed changes, and both of you have been kind of fearful to talk to anyone about it, because you don't want to create a problem for your friend or colleague. So if you know someone that is close enough to them and you feel comfortable, we would encourage you to have that conversation. Also, enlist the support of that person's family if you can. If you are a colleague or a fellow member, if you have access to their friends and family and it is okay with that person and you don't think it would be upsetting to them, reach out to their family, because again, they may have noticed some things as well. And then finally, we say be direct and ask if they're taking care of their overall health. One of the best things that you can do, and that all of us can do, is when we meet our older adults, is talk about the annual Medicare wellness visit. I think if it's an important conversation and an important thing for people to do. So if you're age 65 and older, you can start by saying, have you had your annual Medicare wellness visit where they screen for memory loss, as well as other things? But it's a great way to get that person to kind of consider having a memory screening done to see if there's a change in their cognition, as well as to kind of address a baseline to where their memory might be. Next slide. All right, so the final conversation tips would be surrounding your healthcare provider. So the things that we suggest would be to bring a list of your medications, because sometimes medications can cause memory loss as well. So it's important to let your healthcare provider evaluate what medications you're currently taking or your loved one is currently taking, and if those might have some underlying effects on that person's memory. I also say bring that log that we talked about. So if you've written down some different situations or examples, bring that, because you can share that with the doctor at the time. And then take notes as you talk to the doctor, because they may share information with you that you may not know of. And do not feel afraid to ask questions. And I always say the best tip is, if you do not feel secure in your healthcare provider, please know that you can seek another a professional opinion. And a little bit later in the slides, we'll share some resources for you to get access to medical providers. So have those conversations, and ask questions is really important when talking to the healthcare provider. Next slide. So let's talk a little bit about resources for support. Most importantly, the Alzheimer's Association is here to help family members, no matter where they are with their loved one in the disease progression, from early stage to late stage. The Alzheimer's Association is here to help in various ways. So I want to share several of our support services that are available free of charge. So this is probably one of my favorite services and hands down the best service that we offer, because the helpline is there for family members 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And our helpline specialists are trained to handle any call or any topic or situation that might come up. So we encourage people and families to call us if they have a question about what is dementia or a question about a behavior. We are here to help them navigate that. So please jot down the number 1-800-272-3900 and share it with the friends and families in your networks that might have a loved one living with dementia, because this is one of the best resources to help them kind of navigate this disease. So the helpline is awesome and available to you 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. So next, one of the things that we do, and our hope is to provide this to many of the NCNW sections, would be our virtual programs. So we all have a e-learning site where people can go online and educate themselves as to different topics such as 10 warning signs, understanding Alzheimer's and dementia. And we also do these in person. So if this is something that people are interested in having a speaker come out, we can offer these programs. And we do get detailed. I like to mention this because we have programs that address communication, how to respond to behavior. So no matter the group, if it's a group that just wants general education to caregivers, we can provide education for them. Next slide. So two of our other programs that I think are really helpful would be our program called All's Connected, which is a free online community made up of message boards where people get to connect with others that might be dealing with situations similar to theirs. So you'll see that All's Connected is for people living with Alzheimer's disease or any form of dementia. It's for caregivers or care partners, as well as someone that has lost a loved one to dementia. So you basically log on and there are many different topics from today. I think I took a look at it and someone had a question just like, what do you do if your mom wanders? So it has resources from people that are experiencing the disease. So it's something that we would recommend if you need that support. It is online and available to you. Another resource that is a wonderful one is our Alzheimer's Navigator. So this is a wonderful program to be able to create a care plan for your loved one. As you can see on the screen, it has different topics that you can choose from to create an action plan. So it could be dealing with safety issues. How do you stop your loved one from driving? And All's Navigator is a great tool to and once you develop the plan, to share with your loved ones. So if you're a caregiver and you have family and friends that you want to share information with, this is something that you can fill out, print out, and then share with your loved ones. Next slide. All right, so this is our resource called Community Resource Finder. And Community Resource Finder is really a wonderful resource to help people find local resources online. So no matter where you live in the United States, you would put in your zip code and we'd help you identify resources in your community. For instance, if you were needing assistance with legal issues or financial issues, plug in your zip code and we can help you find an elder law attorney in your area. And if you needed support services such as a sitter or home health, we can help you find it. So this is a great resource for you to check out. And it also has that medical services piece. So again, if you were looking for a neurologist or another specialist, this could give you some information on where to go within your community. All right, and our final resource that I'll mention today is our support groups, which as a support group, as a manager of our support groups, it's a wonderful resource for caregivers. And we have support groups that are for people living with early stage. So we try to offer support groups throughout the United States and have a variety of support groups. So just an example, in the Atlanta area, we have a support group that is for adult children. So truly there is a support group for everyone, no matter what role you might be in, from spouse to child, or if you're a person that is living with Alzheimer's disease, there are support groups there to help you. So I would encourage people, again, you can access this and by going to Community Resource Finder, but I always encourage people to look into support groups, because sometimes people are hesitant, but they are really one of the best supportive resources out there to help. And a person can participate as much or as little as you want. And you can find this information again throughout the country. All right, so that brings us to the end of our presentation, and I'll turn it back over to Beverly and Dr. Brent for our Q&A.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Mia Chester. Thank you, Camilla White, for that awesome information. We have about 10 minutes for questions. So I'll start off with the first question, and then I'll let Beverly, there was a lot of them placed in the chat. I'll let her choose the ones that are most important to address. So the first one that we had are there any promising drug trials, and is it possible for people that want to participate to join them?
So yes, I think we have made a lot of strides in our clinical trials. And as you all may know, there was recently a medication released. So we are getting there. So I'd say please participate in clinical trials. One of the things that you all may know is that as our community is not represented in clinical trials, and so it's important for us to have a role in knowing how medications affect us. So what I will point you to is trialmatch.org, which is our matching service for clinical trials. So basically it takes the footwork out of finding a trial that fits for you. It is based on your individual health makeup, and it will tell you what studies you actually qualify for within your community. So it's a wonderful service. And again, I think we are the future. So we have to participate in those studies, and we have to make sure that we're taking medication that is designed for us.
So the second question is, what are some causes of cognitive decline that are considered reversible dementia?
Yeah, so those are things that I mentioned, such as urinary tract infections. A person might be experiencing memory loss due to B12 deficiency. Depression would even be considered one of the reversible dementias, as well as other things like medications interacting with one another. So there's several of them, and that's why it's important to talk to a doctor, because you might find out that the reason why you're experiencing memory loss is due to another condition that can be treated.
Beverly, do you want to take over some of the questions?
I do, thank you. And one area I want to go back to is specifically to the importance of research and participating in trials. I shared the link for Trial Match, and if we're going to get to a cure that truly works for all communities, especially our communities, we do have to be a part of studies. And so just learn as much as you can and choose one that's right for you. But when we have a cure, we want to ensure that it works for all of our communities. So we can't stress the importance enough of being involved in clinical trials and research. So a few of the questions that came in through the chat are, do the symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia, change over time? And the second part of that question is, how long does it take for the disease to run its course? And so, I can kick things off, to talk about, the symptoms and how they change over time. And they can change over time. So in the early stages, you may notice small changes like forgetfulness. People may not be able to trace their steps, as Camilla and Mia mentioned earlier. And then as time progresses, you may see more extension of those symptoms to where, your loved one may not recognize you by name anymore. So these can extend over time. And Mia, Camilla, I'll turn it over to you about how long does it take for the course or the disease to run its course?
Yeah, so we've heard anywhere that a person can live anywhere from 3 to almost 20 years with the disease. And I think that also depends on when they're diagnosed. So, the earlier that they're diagnosed, you may see a person live longer, but imagine someone living with Alzheimer's disease for 20, years, how taxing that can be on the caregiver.
Absolutely. It really speaks to the importance of an early diagnosis, so that families can plan and be prepared for the duration of caregiving for that amount of time. I just think back to my mom and my aunt caring for my grandmother, and they were not familiar with all of the resources that were out there and just the longevity of having to care for her. So the sooner you can get an early diagnosis and share these resources, it really helps caregivers be prepared for caring for their loved ones.
And hopefully in future webinars, we can do information specific to the caregiver and the burden and how they can manage, the tasks that they have at hand, because it is sometimes it has longevity, and they need how to manage, their loved one's illness.
Yeah, good point.
Let's see, let me go through here and look at the other questions that were added to the chat.
I see a good one. It says, our population does not like being a part of clinical trials because of our past. So how do we overcome that? And they're probably referencing the Tuskegee, incident and different things that have happened. So how do they overcome being afraid to participate in trials?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. You lead it, Beverly, but that's a good question.
Yeah, it is. It's a great question, because again, if we're going to get to this cure,
right,
we have to be a part of the studies. And I think first thing, it's important to know that it is a relevant concern. This is a historic wrongdoing that was done by people in the community that we should trust. And when that trust is broken, it's hard to build it back. But I think one of the things that we can do to be proactive and get encouraged to participate in studies is to ask questions. Know that any study that you're a part of, or even when you sign up, that you have the right to quit a study at any time you feel like you're not comfortable. Ask questions, get as much information as you can, and just do a little bit of that research to find out if this is the study that is truly right for you. I think we don't always ask questions or feel comfortable with asking those questions, but just getting familiar with the study and again, asking those questions. Mia, anything else to add?
I would just add, just to plug Trial Match again, it's another great way to get your feet wet. And to really, if you're not comfortable with medication trials, there are studies out there. So you can start there. And then as your comfort level builds up, I'd say, you can look towards, some of the clinical trials where it might be medication based. But again, we are the key to that. And so I think education is really important. So spot on, Beverly.
And I would like to also add that as a community educator, when we go out into the community, that's always a question that comes up. How can we trust that trial? How do we know what they say that they're doing to us is exactly what's happening? How do we know what the results will be, if the results are accurate, or are they just gearing us towards a certain end state? So we as community educators need to realize that when we out there with the population, that we need to make them comfortable with us. We need to help them to understand the information that we're giving them is accurate. And when we recommend them going forward to a trial match, you got to realize you got to have that community's trust in order to gain that population's interest in doing that trial match as well. Because I've had plenty of questions about the trial match, and it's kind of hard to convince them to actually go forward and do that. Yes, and it does go back to our past.
Mhm.
Absolutely, great feedback. And I think with this partnership with NCNW, this will be so pivotal. And, we're doing broad education now, but there will be an opportunity where NCNW sections can partner with local chapters to be that trusted entity within communities, to build trust, to provide education and information that's needed, so desperately in our community. So I'm looking forward. We all are looking forward to, again, to the great work that we'll do together.
And if I can add one more final piece to that question, when people do, especially if it's drug trials, the FDA now really regulates them, and they have to submit information concerning the medication, if there's been an adverse reaction or a sentinel event. So the FDA, before they approve, when they monitor the trials very closely, and then they determine whether, to approve the medication. So now trials are looked at very closely by the FDA.
Mhm.
Thank you. Appreciate getting tongue-tied. Appreciate you sharing that information. I think it's an important element to understand and to know. All right, let's see here. I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll turn it over to Mrs. Janice Mathis to close us out for the afternoon. So one of the questions is, what's the best way to connect with the Alzheimer's Association?
Well, as a community educator, I would say 1-800-272-3900. And, I use that number quite a bit. I couldn't spell Alzheimer's when my mom was diagnosed with it, and my dad. And they have held my hand since then. And I've learned quite a bit about it, and that is through the 800 number. It's a trusting number. When you call, they understand your questions, and they're always willing to help you take that extra step if it's needed. And I'm quite sure Mia can add something to it, but that's my perspective as a community educator.
No, beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Absolutely. Please use that 1-800. It's 24/7. It's a great way to tap into the association. Also, alz.org is another great resource to direct people just to learn more about the association, the services, the programs, a lot of the resources that Mia and Camilla shared. It's a great way to start and just get acclimated to the association. Well, thank you all so much. Mia and Camilla, you did a great job in providing information, and just look forward to doing this again. This won't be the last time we do this type of education. What I'd like to do now is turn it over to Mrs. Janice Mathis, NCNW's Executive Director, for closing remarks.
Thank you so much. And good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to everyone who tuned in. I am Janice Mathis, the Executive Director of the National Council of Negro Women, where Dr. Janetta Betch Cole is our 7th National President. NCNW was founded in 1935 by Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who many people may not know that she also built a hospital in Daytona for Black folk because there was not one to serve them back in those days. We touch more than 2 million women through our 330 sections and affiliates. And the entire board of directors is behind this wonderful partnership with the Alzheimer's Association. We hope that you gained some insights. I know I certainly did. In this webinar on the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's, it was beautifully presented. Thank you to all of you. And we hope that you got some information that you can actually use and share with your family, your friends, and contacts. This webinar was recorded and will be shared through NCNW's YouTube channel in about 7 to 10 days. Please be sure to share this information so that it can spread throughout our community. Because of the devastating disease impacts women and African American communities at a disproportionate rate, we need to make sure that our communities are equipped with the knowledge and the strategies and resources needed to care for your loved ones living with Alzheimer's. This is a bit personal to me. About 20 years ago, my dad succumbed to Alzheimer's. He was, if you can imagine, a Bill Cosby in the good days type of dad, funny, smart, cute, could dance, could sing, was a preacher and a politician, just a wonderful person, wonderful role model. And then he got Alzheimer's. And I will tell you about being in denial. I was definitely in denial. When a member of his church said to me, who was a nurse and had some experience, "I think your dad has Alzheimer's," I got fighting mad. My father doesn't have Alzheimer's. But then, of course, she was right and I was wrong, and we learned to live with it. It lasted 10 years. And we learned a lot through that process. We pulled together as a family. Fortunately, my sister and I shared the responsibility, which was a lot. But now there's medications that we didn't have then. There are trials we didn't have then, studies we didn't have then. And so I encourage everyone, take advantage of the information and all the resources that Sister Tony Brent and Sister Camilla Wright and Mia Chester and Beverly Berry have provided us, and all the others. And we look forward to helping you spread this information throughout our entire network and really throughout the country. So thank you again for being part of this. And we are so pleased to be a partner with the Alzheimer's Association.
Well, thank you, Sister Mathis, for those closing remarks. I will give it to Beverly to make any final comments.
Thank you all so much. Again, I can't thank you enough for joining us, and just really excited about the movement that we're going to do through this partnership. And we'll be in touch about next steps as we connect NCNW sections with our local chapters, and just even other education opportunities that we'll host together. So have a great Saturday, and we look forward to serving you all in the future. Thank you.
Have a great
Thank
day,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.